From one of Australia's former leading homicide detectives, this is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
We were going out on operations every day with this unit that we worked with. Daheen was the name of the unit. And we're going out on the Huey gunships, doing raids on ranches, and we're going out and doing patrols in the mountains with the Columbia National Police, and we're doing surveillance in the city, and we're paying informants, and we're meeting snitches. We had a 1-800 tip line set up offering a $5 million reward for information on Pablo. I mean, it was very exciting. Yeah. There were times, especially if we were in the city, they had an armored personnel carrier, and so if we were doing stuff in the city, especially if we're going over into the barrios where Pablo's, he's the hero, yeah, they would put me inside the armored car just to protect me a little bit more. But when the shit hits the fan, you don't run away. You got to stand there and fight.
I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
In the second part of my chat with former DEA agent Steve Murphy, we talk about how Pablo Escobar was tracked down and killed in a violent shootout. We talk about the impact the investigation had on Steve and his partner, Javier Peña, and the Colombian police who put their lives on the line to restore peace to their country. We also talk about his experience in the investigation being portrayed in the hugely popular TV series Narcos. It's a fascinating chat. Welcome back to part 2 of I Catch Killers. Let's continue this wild story, and no wonder they made a TV series out of this investigation, and we're going to talk about Narcos TV series, and it's a great series, I've got to say, on Netflix. But before we do, there's a bit of work to do before you start swanning round as the person that's portrayed on the TV series. There was a lot of hard work that you had to do. We've talked about Pablo Escobar. Is there one thing that defines him, like how ruthless he was? You talk in part 1 that he didn't have a conscience, and that he could just kill without a second thought. Is there one thing that demonstrates to the listeners what was the evilness, or something that typified the evilness of the man?
He was in his prison, his custom-built prison, the Cathedral. And he's on the phone with his wife talking, and we're intercepting the phone calls, and he's talking about how much he loves her and how much he misses her and how are the kids and all that. And in the background, you can hear a guy screaming. He's being tortured, and eventually his wife said, "What is that noise?" And he's like, "Hold on a minute." And he covers up I assume he covered up the receiver, and you can hear him say, "Cover his mouth, shut him up." And then it gets real quiet. So, they killed the guy. Yeah. And he's just right back on his, I'll come and see you guys soon. And, you guys have to come and visit me. And just, like nothing happened.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just no conscience whatsoever.
The indiscriminate car bombs that were just, he set a car bomb off on 15th Street in Bogota one time in the northern part of the city. And right where that bomb went off is a mall, and it was the size of a city block, and the whole front of the mall was glass. So when that bomb went off, what happened to the glass? It happened to be a time when moms were there with their school-age children getting school supplies. So Javier and I, we respond down there. We get a phone call about it. We take off and go down there. You can't get very close. You can see the black smoke from where the bomb went off, but you can't get very close because traffic just bogs down. So we park and we get out and we're walking in, and as you get closer, you start hearing the sounds associated with tragedy, the screams and the crying and the begging and all that kind of stuff. And then you get closer and you actually start seeing body parts laying around. And then you get up to the scene and you see the firemen and the police officers carrying the lifeless bodies of little children who just simply were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's probably the most horrific thing I saw while we were down there. There's no way you can justify something like that.
Yeah, that's the results of his actions. What were the circumstances? The luxury self-designed prison that he was residing in. What were the circumstances of him escaping from there? How did that come about?
We got this from an individual who eventually became an informant of ours, and eventually became the biggest drug dealer in Colombia. And who is in prison here in the United States now. So he was the bodyguard for one of Pablo's childhood friends, a guy named Kiko Moncada. Kiko and Pablo grew up together. He was one of the primary lieutenants, and there was another guy named Fernando Galeano. Well, when Pablo went into prison, he imposed a war tax on all the other drug traffickers. And he said, look, I fronted myself out for the good of all of you. I've embarrassed myself. I'm in prison now, country club prison. He said, so what's going to happen is every load that you send up, I get half of it, or you pay me $400,000 cash. Okay. So then they were doing it. Well, after a while, they got tired of doing it. But one day, his sicarios go out and they found a cave that there's this money, US dollars, that have been shrink wrapped and hidden in a cave. And the shrink wrap has come loose. And so air and moisture has been getting in there, and all this money is rotting away. And we've heard it's anywhere from $10 million to $23 million. So they bring it in. They show Pablo, like, look, this is Kiko and Fernando's money, and they're holding out on you. Here you are fronting yourself out, and you're not making all the billions that you were before because you've taken a stance against the government, and you're trying to do good for everybody else. And they get him all fired up. So he has somebody make phone calls, and they call the Galeanos and they call the Moncadas and said, hey, come on up to the prison. We're going to have a barbecue, no business discussed. We're just going to have a good time, bring some hookers in. We'll have some mariachis come in or whatever. No need to bring security details. Everything's good. So they show up. Well, Kiko, according to our source, Kiko comes walking in and he sees the money there on the floor, and he looks at Pablo and sees the look on his face, and he starts saying, Pablo, that's not what you think it is. We're not holding out on you. That's money that's been buried for a long time. Quite honestly, we had forgotten about it. And if you think about it, for moisture and water to get in there to start rotting away paper, that doesn't happen in a few days. I mean, that takes months and months and months of time. So the sicarios are egging Pablo on. Hey, he cheated you, Pablo. Kill him. You need to kill these two. And so eventually they go back and forth, and Pablo gets so incensed that he grabs a stick and he kills his childhood best friend, Kiko Moncada, beats him to death. Then the sicarios, they jump on Fernando Galeano. They do the same to him. Then they started cutting parts of their bodies off and sending them to their families and saying, you owe me this, you owe me that, and if you want to see them again, this is what you got to do. The families didn't know they were already dead. Well, eventually word got out to us about it through an informant, and we went to our bosses and the ambassador, and eventually it went to the president of Colombia, and the message was, do something about this. This is ridiculous. This is embarrassing to your country. It's embarrassing to your administration. You've got to do something. So they come up with an idea that they're going to tell Pablo, okay, we're going to temporarily move you to a different prison so we can reinforce your prison to make it more secure for you. And it's all a ruse.
Yeah.
Well, they send the deputy justice minister up there. This kid, Mendoza, is like 25 years old. He goes up with a Colombian military colonel. They take like 20 troops up there, get to the gate outside. Now, remember who's paying the guards on the inside of the gate. So they're not loyal to the government.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the deputy justice minister looks over to the colonel and says, Colonel, go get him. Colonel said, President didn't tell me to go in there. He told you to go in there. I'm not going in there. You go get him. So this young guy, 25 years old, goes in there. Well, of course, the sicarios immediately take him hostage, and they're slapping him around, and they're trying to get Pablo, kill him. This is the message from the president. They don't respect you, and all that stuff. Well, Pablo tells the justice minister, get the president on the phone. Well, he's calling before the president would take Pablo's calls, believe it or not. But this time, nobody's answering the phone. Yeah. So Pablo kind of sees the writing on the wall. They realize that they don't have enough troops up there to assault the prison. So now they send an elite group of military folks called the Copas. And they go in and they assault the prison. Big firefight. Not a single good guy was wounded that day, believe it or not. And the deputy justice minister, they were able to get him out unscathed. Yeah. Which is just a miracle. Some of the guards were killed, Pablo's guards. A lot of the sicarios were able to escape, not all of them. Some of them chose to stay in the prison. So recently, Javier had done some work for one of the Spanish-speaking stations down in Colombia about the Escobar story. And in exchange, they had access to these photographs. So the press had shown up at the prison because, the word's out that something's going on up there at the cathedral. Yeah. And this one photographer, he got up there, he saw everybody, all the other presses there, worldwide press. And so he goes around and he somehow knows how to get around to the back side of the prison. And he's walking in, excuse me, he's walking into the prison or getting up to where the fence is. And here comes Pablo and some of his henchmen. The story is the cameraman, he laid his cameras down and put his hands up. And he says, Pablo, please don't kill me. I went to this front gate. My producers told me to go get pictures. It's crowded up there. I thought I'd just come around and see what's happening. Pablo said, get your camera, take your camera and take pictures of me. I'm a dead man walking. So that cameraman held on to those pictures. He died recently and his family gave them to this,
wow.
I think it was Univision. And so because of the work Javier had done with them, they gave us license to use these pictures. So we now have 3 photographs that this cameraman took of Pablo and I think it's 4 of his henchmen making their escape. And you can see some of them have guns, pistols tucked in their waistband.
Yeah.
It's not like they're running, scared. They're just getting away.
Walking out.
I've always wondered if, there wasn't some green past hands along the way, because how do you escape from your prison's surrounded? How do you escape?
And if you've got an elite team coming in and securing or rescuing a hostage and taking the Sicarios out, how they got away. But anyway, it's well, it's if it didn't happen, you'd have to invent it. It's crazy. He gets out. That sort of turns your world upside down for the next 18 months, because you're being then called, you and Javier, and asked to be stationed down in Medellin and get right into the thick of the efforts to recover him. And you worked with a lot of different sections, and I know you pay a lot of tribute to the Colombian National Police and the courage of those guys and search block. When he got out, and I think this is a quote from your book, when he was on the run, just to give you a sense of what happened after he escaped. Between the 22nd of July 1992, when Escobar escaped, and mid-March 1993, 136 police officers had been killed in the line of duty by Escobar's hitmen. So that's 136 police I'm talking about. The death tolls throughout the country had also increased. Colombia had seen its deadliest year, with nearly 29,000 homicides reported in 1992, compared to 25,110 for the previous year in Medellin and Bogota. 112 civilians had died from random car bomb attacks and 427 had been injured. It's just on a scale that's hard to comprehend. And that's in that passage of time when he was on the run, when you guys were part of a team tasked with tracking him down.
It was. It's. I mean, I'm sure it's the same in Australia. If an Australian police officer is killed in the line of duty, here in the United States, we stop everything. Everybody stops to contribute to the case to get that guy. When here you're talking about over 130 police officers in about a 6 or 7 month period were murdered. Pablo put a bounty on them of $100 each. I mean, that was a police officer's life was worth $100. It's ridiculous.
And that was just anyone could collect that bounty. Just take out the cop.
There was Javier was with. We worked with a very elite unit of Colombian National Police officers, and they got a call one night that one of the Sicarios was at this nightclub, and they didn't have enough bodies, so Javier went along with them. And so this kid's 15 years old. He's out on the dance floor with his girlfriend. They go out and grab him. He's got a gun in his waistband. They wrestle him. He fights. They get him down the floor, get him cuffed up, take him out. Well, this kid talks. He doesn't know he's not supposed to talk. He said he had already killed, I think it was something like 10 police officers. And Javier asked him, he said, how do you do this? He said, well, you just, these uniformed guys, they're walking the streets and they stop and talk to each other or stop to talk to people on the street, and you just walk up behind them and shoot them in the back of the head. He said, the most I've killed in one day was 3. And then you go to an address and you tell them, and, they give you $100 for each cop that you've killed. And Javier said, what do you do with the money? He said, well, most of it I give to my mom, because she had, she was one of those people living on the edge of a trash dump. And he said, I keep enough money for myself to have a nice pair of tennis shoes, nice pair of jeans, and I need beer money. But everything else, she gets everything else. And I thought, just no remorse whatsoever.
Yeah.
But a man or a woman that's brave enough to put a uniform on and your life is worth $100.
Yeah. I know you
horrific.
guys had a lot of respect for the courage that they had. That they were out putting themselves out there, and they knew their life was literally at risk. What about yourself and Javier? Like, I read somewhere that you had a bounty on you for $300,000. With the greatest respect, you would sort of stand out in Colombia, and people would know who you are. So how did you feel with what was going on?
Well, I mean, we're cops. You don't show fear, but when you first find out about it, it's like, that's all. I'm worth more than $300,000. But the truth is, it's very disconcerting to start with. It's like,
that's a good way.
This guy's got a bounty on me. And you're right. I mean, my family, my grandmother immigrated from England. My dad's family immigrated from Ireland. I'm about as white as you get. I don't blend into a Hispanic country, I'm 6'2". I have light-colored eyes. I used to have brown-colored hair. Yeah. I just kind of stick out.
The gringo. And they would have known that you guys were like the intel, and you couldn't trust everyone that was involved in the investigation. So they would have very much known who you guys were.
Absolutely. I mean, we were going out on... So, back up just a second. The embassy told us, the ambassadors, I don't want you guys going out in the field. You stay at the police base. Yeah. Well, we can't do our job if we do stay back in the back. And we had the U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6 was there with us. We had the U.S. Army's Delta Force. They were there with us. Of course, the CIA's in there. They're coming and going as they want. The military guys were under the same orders as us. Well, they're military, so they follow orders. Yeah. We kind of looked at them as strong suggestions instead of orders. And so, I mean, just imagine you're still in the job there in Australia, and I come to your country, and I tell you, Gary, I heard there's Pablo Escobar's down there at the pub, man. Go see if he's down there. I'm going to get a cup of coffee and come back and tell me what you find. Yeah. What are you going to tell me? Yeah, I know what you're going to tell me.
Yeah, 100%. I understand, but I like the way it's just a suggestion. It wasn't an order. Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. But
yeah. Well, but what that led to is we were going out on operations every day with this unit that we worked with. Daheen was the name of the unit, and we're going out on the Huey gunships, doing raids on ranches, and we're going out and doing patrols in the mountains with the Colombian National Police, and we're doing surveillance in the city, and we're paying informants, and we're meeting snitches. We had a 1-800 tip line set up offering a $5 million reward for information on Pablo. It was exciting. I mean, it was very exciting. Yeah. There were times, especially if we were in the city, they had an armored personnel carrier, and so if we were doing stuff in the city, especially if we're going over into the barrios where Pablo's, he's the hero. Yeah. They would put me inside the armored car just to protect me a little bit more. But and you had a machine gunner on top, and but then trying to clean up my language, when the shit hits the fan, you don't run away. You got to stand there and fight. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a big difference from where you started your law enforcement. There was a lot. Yeah. There was a DEA agent that was abducted by a cartel in Mexico, and you think that played a part, that the consequences. Do you want to just explain to the listeners what the circumstances of that was? It was a horrific situation, but the response is probably protected people down the track. Do you want to explain those circumstances? I gladly will. That was the case of Kiki, or Enrique Kiki Camarena was our agent's name. This is in 1985. He had been stationed. Kiki was a former U.S. Marine. He'd been a cop in Calexico, California before DEA. Joined DEA, did his time down on the border, got volunteered to go to Guadalajara, Mexico. He was actually born in Mexico. So he spoke perfect Spanish. He's down there, he's just kicking butt and taking names. The problem back then was these massive marijuana grows. The ones up in the mountains, the quality wasn't as good, but the Mexican traffickers learned about sensibilia, which is something that American marijuana growers just developed. And they took the seeds out of the plants, and it made it a much more potent strain of marijuana. So through payoffs and so forth, they bought this desert land, and they had to drill these massive wells to get water, because marijuana grows require a lot of water. So Kiki gets information through an informant, and at one point, the government of Mexico would let the United States do flyovers looking for marijuana fields or poppy fields because of Mexican heroin. Well, a new president comes in and he bans all that. So now Kiki's relying on informants, and apparently he had the knack for dealing with informants. He has one that's a pilot. He gets information where there's this massive marijuana grow. I think that one was 200 acres. They do a couple flyovers, which were illegal, and confirmed it was there. Got the Mexican police to go raid the place. And I forget how much it was capable of producing, but 200 acres of marijuana plants, just massive.
Yeah.
Well, then as time goes on, he finds out about this other grow. This time it was 2,500 acres, 2,500 acres, just massive.
Forest.
And they rated that. I think they said that field alone was capable of $4 billion of weed per grow. And I think you could grow it at least twice a year down there. So that led to him, he was ready to rotate out of Guadalajara back to the United States. But these three drug traffickers, Rafael Caro Quintero, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, and the third guy's name was Fonseca. I can't remember his full name. Those were the three guys that started the Guadalajara cartel in Mexico. So they orchestrated a kidnap. Kiki came out of the consulate in Guadalajara to go meet his wife for lunch. They surround him, kidnap him, take him to a house. He's tortured for over 30 hours. He's actually killed 3 different times. They've got a doctor there that when the first 2 times when he died, they would inject adrenaline into his heart to restart his heart so they could kill him again. It's just horrific what they did to Kiki, and they also did the same thing to the pilot. I think his name was Zavala. Then, of course, DEA realizes that Kiki's missing because he didn't show up for his lunch with his wife, and then he doesn't show home that night. And so this massive manhunt is underway. The United States starts applying pressure to the Mexican government. Finally, they just designate somebody to be a scapegoat, and they kill him and throw him out and said, okay, there's the guy that killed Kiki and the pilot. Well, the United States knew that wasn't true. So our president back at the time, and I'm not sure we have presidents that have these kind of cojones now, but the president back then shut down the border between the United States and Mexico. It took less than 1 day for the Mexican government to come back and say, okay, we're back in. I think it took 30 days before they finally found Kiki's body. Him and the pilot were wrapped up in plastic. So seeing that, what the response of the United States was, and it might be the same now because we have a new president, but past administrations would certainly not have gone to those lengths because a DEA agent was killed. So if you think about it, the drug traffickers are in business to make money. If you shut down the border, they can't get the product into the United States, where we're the leading consumer country of illegal narcotics in the world. That's a reputation we truly enjoy having. It's outrageous. But they knew that we had wiretaps. One wiretap where Pablo's talking makes reference to the 2 gringos, and then a short time later, he actually mentions the names Peña and Murphy.
Right. Okay.
That was worse. That was worse than finding out there's a $300,000 bounty on your head. But this guy knew your name.
Yeah, but then it becomes personal.
Yeah. But, so if I think Pablo knew that if he really took us out, they could have killed us numerous times. I mean, we're out on operations. Anything could happen. But then, they're not going to make the money that's what they're in business for. So that's why we say Kiki's legacy.
Yeah, and that's passed on, and I suppose it gives the sense that there's going to be a reaction that people don't want coming if something happens to people like yourself. I'm glad that sort of response was done, because that's the type of response that's needed. Okay, so what were the strategies? You got you got him out of prison. He's creating chaos, and chaos is a nice way of putting the horrific situation with people being killed left, right, and centre. What were the strategies to bring him down, and the people that you're working with to find him?
Well, our ambassador brought in the SEAL Team 6 and the Delta Force guys. The operators, the Delta and SEALs guys, they brought in assets that we didn't have access to. So they were able to glean intelligence that we were getting real-time intelligence that, hey, Pablo's here, Pablo's there. And this is in the first few weeks. I remember we went to a huge church and just searched that in the middle of the night when we were able to get out, get some troops to go, and just, we searched for a couple hours, couldn't find a thing. And the lower ranking Colombian officers they're getting tired and they just want to go back to the barracks and sleep. And I'm not wanting to leave. And Javier's the same way. We got to keep going, got to keep going. And eventually, the commander of the unit comes over and he's like, look, we're going. We can't find him. He's not here.
Yeah.
And it just over and over. There was times when we hit one cabin and the coffee was still warm in the mug. There was a cigarette in the ashtray still burning.
Frustrating.
And Pablo was known. He had this fetish for fancy bathrooms, gold-plated fixtures and things like that. You go in these little shanties, but it had a really nice bathroom. You knew that was Pablo's, one of his places. And he'd always have a lady in there cooking, and he'd have a young girl in there as the cleaning lady, but more like his personal enjoyment type thing.
Yeah. Okay, so what was the thing that finally located him? One particular incident?
It was. Well, so Colonel Hugo Martinez is our boss. He's the guy in charge of the bloque de búsqueda, the search box, what it translates to. And his son is a Lieutenant Hugo Martinez. Well, the lieutenant taught himself how to use radio directional finding equipment. The government of France donated a bunch of vans that had radio directional finding equipment mounted in them, and the algorithm that they used back then was triangulation, which is pretty simple to figure out. Medellin's built in a bowl, so you put 3 vans up on high spots, they shoot the signal out. Where the 3 signals intersect, that's where Pablo's phone is coming from, because it wasn't 3G, 4G, 5G phones like we enjoy today. They were basically radio telephones.
Yeah.
If he wanted to, he knew we were listening. If he wanted to thwart our efforts to listen to him, all he had to do was change the frequency. But the challenge to him was he had to get the new frequency to the people he wanted to talk to. So it wasn't quite as easy to just spin that dial. So they triangulate on the signal. The margin of error back at that time could be 2-3 city blocks large.
Yeah.
So to refine that area down, you send somebody in with holding an antenna out their car window driving down the street, and that was Lieutenant Martinez. He's got a meter in one hand, he's got a driver driving him, and he's driving down the street. He thinks he's found this warehouse, and so they bring the Dahin guys in. They launch an operation. It's an empty warehouse. So, the grief he caught from all the other cops, because oh, you idiot,
Yeah.
you know how we are.
Oh yeah,
no mercy. No mercy.
You make a mistake, you pay for it, and you're ridiculed.
Yes, you do.
One lousy mistake.
Yep. So what he did is he found there was a body of water next to this warehouse, and water will affect the way that radio waves pass through the air. Yeah. So he recalibrated his equipment to include that water area, and he gets another hit. So he's driving down the street holding this antenna out the window. He says, we've got a reenactment video where he's actually interviewed, and he looks up and he says he sees Pablo Escobar on the phone talking, looking at him. Well, we're listening to the phone call on the wiretap. There's never any, we went back and listened to this a lot of times. There's never any indication that Pablo saw Lieutenant Martinez or this man driving down the street holding an antenna out the window, which was, something you don't see every day. And the only explanation we've ever come up with is, when you ask me a question, I'm reliving a lot of things in my mind, and I'm seeing you on the screen, but I'm more in my mind reliving things. I don't.
Yeah.
You could pick your nose, and I probably wouldn't even pick up on it because
I deny that. I deny that allegation, Steve. I was not.
I didn't see it. Okay. I didn't see it. So, and that's the only thing only explanation we ever came up with.
Yeah.
Well, now you've got 100% confirmation. There's Pablo.
There he is.
Row house.
Yep.
So, I'm back at the base, and I'm actually in the room with all the gringos talking because it's just kind of nice to talk to your countrymen every once in a while, and just you're talking sports or whatever, girlfriends or whatever. And I see we're in this quad area, and I see the executive staff for the colonel, his majors, and his lieutenant colonels running across the quad. And that's a clue something's going on. So I told the gringos, I said, "Hey man, something's happening. I'll be right back." And so I go to the Colonel Martinez's office, and we had a good enough relationship, mutual respect, that he sees me at the door and he's like, come on in. And he's on the phone with the lieutenant, and he's giving him instructions. He's like, okay. He says, we've got Pablo located with 100% margin of error, no margin of error whatsoever. The Colonel's saying, okay, we're loading up the troops. Well, loading up 600 people takes a while.
Yeah.
You can't knock it out in 5 or 10 minutes. He said, but whatever you do, don't let him get away. Surround it and keep him there. Don't let him get away. Well, these Dahin guys, they interpreted that to mean, let's go get him. The American operators had taught them how to use det cord to blow doors open. So this is a 3-story row house. They line the front door, blow the door off the hinges. They go in. The first floor is a combination garage, kitchen, laundry room, or cleaning room, maybe maid's quarters back there. Then you go up to the second floor, and there's a living room, there's a couple bedrooms, and the third floor is all bedrooms and bathrooms. So as they get up to the second floor, they clear the first floor, they go up to the second floor. There's Pablo running up to the third floor. They exchange shots with each other. One police officer actually tripped on the steps, which saved his life because Pablo shot at him right at that time, and it went right over the top of his head.
Lucky.
Pablo at one time had as many as 500 sicarios protecting him. On December 2nd, 1993, he was down to one guy. His nickname was Limon. I can't remember his real name. Limon gets to the third floor window. The row house behind him was a 2-story. So he could jump out that window onto the roof of this 2-story, and then they were going to make their escape out the back way. Well, the cops had sent a couple guys around the back. They order Limon to drop his weapons and surrender. He starts shooting at him from the roof, and they tune him up, and he falls off dead onto the ground. Now Pablo gets up to that third window, or that third floor in that window, and he knows good guys are coming up steps. Now he's heard this shooting outside, so he knows there's good guys out there, and he knows he's in a crossfire. He goes ahead and jumps out the roof. The building next to this 2-story was another 3-story, so there's a wall here. And Pablo's trying to inch along that wall to see where the guys are on the ground. These guys are coming up to the front window. He's like, screw it. He takes off running across the roof, shooting at them. They catch him in a crossfire. He's hit 3 times, once in the back of the leg, once in the butt cheek, which both of those are knockdown shots, but neither one was a kill shot. And then the kill shot was a .223 round through the ear. There's a lot of speculation about that round through the ear.
Yeah.
His son, Juan Pablo, would have you believe that his dad committed suicide. I've took the pictures.
Yeah.
We don't post those on the internet, but you can see them all on the internet because people take pictures during our presentations and they post them. When I was a city cop, I've worked murders and I've worked suicides. I'm also a former firearms instructor for DEA. You know that when you shoot a bullet and it comes out the end of the barrel, there's little bits of gunpowder that follow the bullet out, and they'll travel a certain distance before they lose their velocity and fall to the ground. Even if you could hold a gun at arm's length, and remember it's a .223, so now he's going to have to turn a rifle around and shoot himself in the ear, there would be powder burns all over the side of his head. You can go online and look at those pictures. I promise you there's not a single powder burn on there. So he was killed by the Colombian National Police. It's not suicide. The kid, I don't know why he's, maybe if Pablo Escobar had been my dad, I think I'd like to change the legacy of his memory too, but that's
that
not true. It's a lie.
If you've seen it, no gunshot residue there. When it happened, you've come out shortly after, and some of the photos that you talk about, the photos that have been out in the public, they were photos that you actually took.
Right, and you see on the Narcos series, it shows that I was on the roof when Pablo was killed. That's not true. I rode out after the fact with Colonel Martinez in his Jeep. Yeah.
And when you got there, and you had to go there, identify him, and just corroborate the fact that it is him. How did you feel? Like the pressure you had been under, culminating in that. I'm sure it felt surreal at the time, but talk us through it.
And that's the thing. So when one of the majors on the Dahin unit, after they kill Pablo, he comes back, he radios back, Viva Colombia, Pablo's dead. I took off running over to the wire room to call the embassy to, because you got to let your bosses know what happened.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't get through to the DEA office, to the front office. So I ended up calling our admin office. One of the secretaries answered, and she's like, "Oh, hey, Steve, how you doing?" I'm like, "Go get Mr. Toft," was our boss. I said, "Go get Mr. Toft." "Oh, okay, is everything okay?" I'm like, "Go get Mr. Toft now. Quit wasting time," And so it took 2-3 minutes before he came on the phone, which just seemed like an eternity, because I know that they're mounting up the troops and getting ready to go out there. When Mr. Toft comes on the phone, the first thing he says is, "They just killed Pablo." I'm like, "Well, no shit. That's why I'm calling you." And so I told him what had happened, and he said, "Listen, get out there, confirm this is Pablo. We've been down this road before where we get our hopes up. Go make sure this is Pablo." So I run back to the barracks to get my gear, my gun and everything, and come running back out, and everybody is gone. The only people there are the guards on the gates. I don't have a car. I don't know where they are.
All dressed up and know where to go.
That's exactly right. So I'm just standing there, just trying to go through my mind. All right, how am I going to do this? Maybe I could call a taxi, And finally, here comes Colonel Martinez with his protection detail driving back in, and he sees me standing out in the middle of the quad. He's like, "Steve, what are you doing?" They actually call me Stick, because they couldn't say Steve, so it came out of Stick. It was my nickname. He said, "Stick, what are you doing?" And I said, "I need a ride, Colonel." He's like, "Get in the Jeep, So I ride out with him. We get out there. We go in the door that the Daheen guys had made entry. We search the first floor, take pictures, go to the second floor, take pictures, get to the third floor, and that's the window. So I get to that window, I look out, and there's all our Daheen buddies out there over the body. And I yell to them, and they're all yelling back, holding their rifles up, "We got him, it's Pablo, he's dead." Well, now thousands of people are starting to come out. It's because they just heard this big, massive gun battle. We've got our 600 people out there. Then the Colombian military shows up with a couple hundred. I mean, there's just great security. But eventually I got around back with the colonel, and we climbed up on the roof. And that's when I took the pictures of Pablo. And the whole purpose of that was for identification purposes.
Yeah.
When that was over, we're standing on the roof, and this group of people show up, and they're making a commotion. And I looked at one of the lieutenant colonels was up there. Colonel Pelias was with me, and I said, "Colonel, who's that down there?" And he said, "Well, that's Pablo's mom, and that's Pablo's sister." I'm like, "Oh, really?" So let's just watch them for a minute. So we watch them, and they're arguing with the police and the military. And finally, his sister, she's really loud and obnoxious.
Yeah.
She's like, "I want to see, you say that's Pablo on the ground. I want to see him. I want to see that that's my brother." So she goes over to where Limon, the bodyguard, is laying. And she just goes off on the police. She's like, "Oh, you idiots, that's not Pablo Escobar. You killed the wrong person. You don't even know what you're doing." And she just lets them have it. Finally, she calms down, and one of the cops looks at her and says, "Look on the roof, bitch." That's where Pablo was up on the roof.
Yeah.
So I stuck around, watched them. Once the mother and the sister saw Pablo's body brought off the roof, and I saw their reaction, there was no question in my mind whatsoever that was Pablo Escobar.
Yeah.
Now, the police were worried about my safety because, we weren't allowed to wear anything that looked like police or military. So we typically wore, polo shirts and jeans, tennis shoes.
Yeah.
For whatever reason that day, I had a red polo shirt on, which really, I don't stick out enough, so I wore a red shirt,
Yeah.
Go figure.
Good choice.
So now the press is starting to show up, and I don't want to be on camera because we don't want this to look like it was orchestrated by the United States. We want the Colombian National Police to have the credit for everything, and rightfully so. So the colonel's like, this lieutenant colonel, he said, "Okay, Steve, we're going to get you back." And so he gave me a protection detail, and they escorted me back to the base. That night, we went into total lockdown. You were... I know you see this on TV, but you literally have your gun under your pillow because you're expecting this retaliatory tax, retaliation from the Narcos. Quietest night I ever spent in Medellin was that night.
Yeah.
The next day, they made Javier go to Miami to talk to an informant, which was a bogus trip. We knew the informant didn't have the information, but the ambassador ordered Javier to go. So he flew back into that. Pablo was killed on a Thursday. He flew back to Bogota on Thursday night. Friday, he flew up to Medellin, sent a gunship out to bring him into the base, high five, congratulations and all that. We were there for a couple hours, and he and I Friday night flew back to Bogota. And we weren't supposed to ride taxis down there because of the danger factor. Well, the embassy didn't send anybody out to pick us up. So we jumped in a taxi, went back to the embassy. My wife was working in the embassy at that time, and it's probably 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. And, she had lots of pizzas and lots of cases of beer, and we celebrated that night. We got home Saturday morning, probably about 10:30, 11 o'clock. It was an all-nighter. It was one hell of a party.
Well deserved.
It was, and that was a long story, your short question. It felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off our shoulders.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife and I had adopted our first daughter down there in October before Pablo was killed. And then I had to go back to Medellin. And Monica at that time, she was 8 months old when we got her. And I'm not even getting to spend any time with my new daughter.
Yeah.
So it was, it's hard to describe. It's just, wow.
What?
He's finally dead. He's really finally dead.
And what was the ongoing reaction from that, from him being taken out? Did it make a difference?
That's a good question. And a lot of people ask us that, especially when we go to the UK.
Yeah.
I tell you what, in England, audiences are tough over there. And we always do a Q&A, so they can ask us anything. And here's what we did. And you already mentioned the statistics. In 92 and 93, Medellin, Colombia was the murder capital of the entire world, one of the most dangerous cities in the world. So we looked at the murder rate in Medellin prior to Pablo's death, and then we waited a couple of months and checked the murder rate. And I challenge every audience to go check and see if I'm telling the truth, because what I found and what you'll find is that the murder rate in Medellin, Colombia had dropped by almost 80% simply because Pablo Escobar was dead.
Yeah.
Now, did we make a difference on cocaine trafficking? We did. Probably lasted maybe 2 weeks at most. The sad thing is, here in the United States right now, you can go on almost any street corner and buy cocaine. Certain areas of town you go to. So people say, well, the war on drugs is lost, that it was just been a colossal waste of time and human life.
Yeah.
Well, what would it be like if law enforcement wasn't out there fighting this scourge? Would you be safe to do anything? Because there's going to be drug addicts everywhere. They're going to be robbing you. They're going to be stealing. They're going to kill you. They're going to be jacking your car. It made a difference. It's just, it didn't end the war on drugs.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen until the demand goes away.
Well, how do you approach it? That's a subject for another time. We've the way of looking at drugs. We've got the problem over here like they have in most places, and we've been fighting it for a long time, or trying to control it for a long time, and it just doesn't seem to make a difference. But I think highlighting what you were doing. Your job was to locate and capture Pablo Escobar, and by doing so, you made a difference. And I look at that from an investigation point of view, and I'm trying to compare it with investigations that really took me away from my family, took me away from everything, and you have to focus on it. A job of that magnitude, that's like an investigation on steroids. Were you on a low after it, or did you feel like you lacked purpose, or did you use it to just go, okay, I've done the hard yards, now I can have a bit of a rest or take some time to find myself again?
I was there until June. So he was killed December 93, and I transferred back to the United States in June of 94, and Javier came out, I think, in September. I ended up in North Carolina. Never seen crack cocaine in my life. I've spent 4 years in Miami, 3 years in Bogota, and I ended up in Greensboro. And crack cocaine is the drug, evil drug of that area at the time. So you address whatever the drug problem is in the area that you're assigned. But when I got to Greensboro, and I didn't even know where it was, I had to look it up on a map. When I got to Greensboro, I felt like that's when the job got to be a lot of fun. That I had no pressure whatsoever to prove myself to anybody. I felt like I survived Miami in the 1980s. I survived the Pablo Escobar manhunt. That's when the job got to be fun.
Yeah.
I mean, we had 5 agents trying to cover 20 plus counties. So we always worked with our state and local partners, which, quite honestly, I prefer working with anyway, because they're a lot more fun to hang out with, and they don't complain when it's quitting time, and I mean, they're dedicated. Most DEA agents are, but not all. So I guess that was the thing for me. It was I had become a workaholic. I think. I mean, we were. Gosh, if you were in the embassy, we lived off of coffee and donuts every day. It was that sugar and caffeine kept you going. I'd stop by the nurse's station and get my blood pressure checked, and it was never high. So it was felt like the good man upstairs was taking care of me health wise. The Columbia National Police, especially the Daheen guys, when the bullets started flying, we knew they wouldn't run off and leave us. I mean, they'd stand there and fight to protect us, but they knew we wouldn't run off and leave them either. So it was one of the, I'd never want to do any of that again, especially at this old man age, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's what we're doing in retirement is, I never dreamt we'd be doing anything like this. Being on a podcast with you, and you're in Australia, I get to travel the world. This is our 10th year of traveling around the world, telling the true story about Pablo Escobar. We talk about leadership, decision making, teamwork. I'm having a blast in retirement, I have to say.
Well, like full credit to you, but I think it starts, and you didn't start off that investigation thinking, okay, I'm in 20 years, 30 years time, I'm going to be doing a tour around the world. I'm going to speak on someone's podcast overseas, and that's I can see, and I know. You're a cop. You know other cops. I can see the joy that you took from the work that you're doing. It has the highs, it has the horror, but there's also something that it was the right fit for you, obviously, doing policing. But your life after policing, hobnobbing it around the world, and your Netflix series Narcos. Tell us how it came about.
Well, a friend of mine had introduced me to two Hollywood producers, and Javier and I are still on the job. And I would call him. He was in Texas, I was in Virginia, and you kind of get your hopes up that, maybe somebody is interested in this story, because it was so long ago. And both of those producers wanted to take our story and make political statements out of it. That's like, I'm about as apolitical as you're going to get. So you get your hopes up, but then nothing happens and you get disappointed. So when I got the call about this guy named Eric Newman in Hollywood wanted to talk to us, I refused to call him to start with. And the guy that called me was an old Marine buddy. And I told him, I said, okay. He cussed me out. That's what he did. And I was like, okay, I'll call him. So I called Eric, and he kind of gave me his little spiel on the phone. And I said, thank you, but I think we'll pass. And it got real quiet on the phone. I said, Eric, are you still there? And he's like, I can't believe you just said no. And we've since learned that people will pretty much sell their soul to be on TV in Hollywood. There's some strange people out there. And so he said, listen, I'm coming to Washington next month. Can I take you to dinner? I'll have a couple of writers. Let's just talk about this and see if we can change your mind. And Gary, you'll understand this. I'm thinking that's going to be a free dinner in a really nice restaurant. Yes, I will meet you. And it was. It was a French restaurant.
Yeah.
So we, after we talked to them, I just kind of developed a connection with them. They were very open and honest and transparent about everything. And so we're getting ready to leave the restaurant. He says, so what are you going to do? And I said, well, let me talk to Javier and maybe we'll pursue this and see where it goes. So my initial conversation with Eric was in February of 2013. In March is when we had dinner. In May, we signed contracts with Netflix. And at the end of June, I retired from DEA. I retired from law enforcement after 38 years.
Yeah.
And in July, we were sitting in Hollywood starting to write the first season of Narcos with all the writers. So it went just like that.
Bang. Perfect timing for you. The obvious question you want to ask is who's going to play you. At what point in time did you ask who's going to play you?
It wasn't too far into it. There was between Eric and one of his other producers is a guy named Chris Brancato, who Chris and I have stayed friends, and I've worked on a couple other projects with him. And I think what they would do is there are organizations in Hollywood that, they're talent agencies, so they represent certain actors and actresses, and so they would bring us these booklets and said, here's some of the booklet might be this thick, and they'd say, here's some of the people we're thinking about playing your part. And you start going through there, and you see John Travolta, and you see Armie Hammer, and you see Jake Gyllenhaal, and I'm like, holy cow! I'm not a big TV watcher, but even I knew who these people were.
Yeah.
And I think it was just to placate us, to keep us from asking questions, because that's not who they hired at all.
All right. So they just keep these idiots happy.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
It's an experience, and Matt, it's been, I believe it's one of the top Netflix series that they've put out, the original series. And, the question that often gets asked too when your life or investigations played out in TV world, was it true? And in terms of things that happened, what's your take on Narcos?
It's the timeline, the chronological timeline is pretty accurate, but we did our own analysis of the first 2 seasons, because that's the 20 episodes about Pablo Escobar, and we figured that about a third of what you see in there is true. The second third, well, those events happened, but they haven't been portrayed correctly. They've been dramatized greatly, or they've taken other incidents and combined them and things like that. But then that last third is just straight out make-believe Hollywood. I was never kidnapped. We weren't pushing people out of helicopter doors at 3,000 feet. Javier wasn't passing classified information to Los Pepis. But like when we're on stage, what I joke around about it, what is true is that Javier really is a man slut. And it's funny because when his wife's in the audience, I always go before the show and say, Beverly, now you know what I'm going to say. Are you okay with it? She's like, yeah, go ahead. I know what you're doing.
Well, that's good, but it's certainly the way he was portrayed, but he seems to enjoy it. It must be great, you two still being in contact when you've been through an experience like you went through. I take it you've remained lifelong friends, and you must be having a ball doing what you're doing, because you do some live shows as well. You've been over to Australia and UK and across America. You enjoying yourself?
Yeah. Brother, I'm having a blast. We've been on every continent except Africa and Antarctica, and I'm not going to Antarctica, but we were supposed to go to Africa the first year of COVID, and of course that killed that.
Yeah.
But our first 4 years before COVID, we averaged 75 shows a year. Yeah. So I saw Javier more than I saw my wife, but my marriage was stronger than ever.
Yeah.
I went home.
You've got to get away from him. You're probably sick of him. And what's you're also doing a podcast, Game of Crimes. What's the backstory to that?
It's very similar to what you're doing. It's I started out with a friend of mine. We came up with this idea. He used to be a Kansas state trooper and a detective out there. And during COVID, we got bored and decided we'd start a podcast. And I didn't even know what a podcast was, but he did. So he had to leave the show last April because he still had a day job, and they increased his responsibilities, but they also doubled his paycheck, and that pays a whole lot more than a podcast.
Right.
But coming up on the end of the 4th year here in June, going to start the 5th year, every show has a guest. It's mostly current or former law enforcement, occasionally a first responder or military. I bring in military veterans, and even every once in a while I'll bring in a former bad guy. And let the listeners get the perspective from his viewpoint. And most of them, they have to have atoned for their crimes. Most of them have done their time in prison and they've changed their lives. And I had one guy that was just a couple of months ago, that was the president of the Hells Angels in Los Angeles for 35 years. And he really wouldn't come off of it. He did his prison time, but I asked him, I said, is there anything you changed in your life? And he's like, nope, not a thing. So he's the only one that really hasn't come across to be a good guy now.
It's interesting, Steve. You're touring the world. You've got the TV series, podcast. You also wrote a book, Manhunters, and the bringing down Pablo Escobar, which I read cover to cover, and it's a great read and gives a really good insight into what you've done.
Just to give you a little inside secret, we had a ghostwriter.
No.
Yeah. Well, I tried writing it, and it looked like a third grader had written it.
Well, when I left the cops and trying to, I was doing journalism and writing articles and the book, it looked like a fact sheet until someone pulled me aside and slapped me and said, "Look, stupid, you've got to add a bit of colour to this. We just don't want the fact sheet." Oh, okay, all right, add a bit. If I went back to the cops now, I'd love to write a fact sheet because it'd be very creative. It'd be a cold, dark night when I came across the deceased. Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah.
Look, thank you very much for your time, and we literally have just scratched the surface of your stories, and but from a law enforcement officer's point of view, I think what you did, I can see the sacrifices you made, and we haven't really delved into all the sacrifices you made in your personal sacrifices, hunting down the world's most wanted man, and all the other things that you've done in your career, but also. Someone like you, I think, inspires law enforcement officers. Like, you're this dumb kid from the country that ended up, living the life that you lived because of the job that you did.
Yeah, I've been blessed in my life. I've been blessed in my career. You mentioned the families of our families that sacrifice so much. I refer to them as the unsung heroes. So I always give them a shout out. And just to finish up about the Escobar story, the real heroes, it's not Javier Peña and Steve Murphy. It's not the United States. It's Colombian National Police, because they took their country back. Yeah.
No, it always comes across when I hear you talk about giving the tribute to the sacrifices they made as well. But look, it's been an honour and a privilege, and I've really enjoyed the chat. So, take care. You look like you're enjoying life. Cheers.
Life is good. I'm sitting at the beach right now, so life's pretty good.
There you go. Good stuff.
All right.
Thank you.